Welcome back, everybody. We are getting started into the coloring now. As you can see, I've switched over to Photoshop. I'll go ahead and set up the file. I mentioned that when I created this, that it is a bitmapped file. So in order to add color, because as I said, it's only black and white, I have to change it to grayscale and then change it to RGB. I always work in RGB because of Abe, who recommended that you do that because your screen is seeing it in RGB anyway, so you might as well have it accurate. As you can see, just changing it to this has not affected this line art. So, a couple things I have to do in order to make it so that I can draw underneath it, add the color. So, something I realized I hadn't talked about yet. This being the 100th strip is a big celebration for me. But there's one other big thing that happened this week that is part of why it's a celebration for me. So, there we go. Ooh, to white. So, CosPain is one of two big projects that I am doing. The other one is a sequel to my graphic novel. I am a big fan of the mystery genre, and it's been one of my frustrations that there have not been nearly as many mystery comics out there as there should be, at least that are English native. The Japanese love mystery comics. They make manga in this genre all the time, and it made me realize that it's kind of the perfect way to do a mystery, is have it be a comic. And as a result, I'm trying to make more mystery comics. I did a graphic novel. It was part of my senior thesis at CCS, and I finished within a year of graduation. I turned in a version that showed the plan to finish and had some finished pages, but then I actually finished later, called The Letters of the... Hold on, I'm sorry, I just spilled something hot on me. Woo! Apologies, I need to clean this up. So, as I was saying, the book I made is called The Letters of the Devil. I self-published it about a year and a half ago at this point, and it was a huge deal for me. First time self-publishing, first graphic novel, a lot of firsts in this one. And I'm working now on the sequel. I actually announced when I released this that the sequel would be coming out in 2019. And if you haven't noticed, guess what year it is? So I've been working to get it out, and it's hit a number of speed bumps, but I've managed to get it back on track and started actually hitting my deadlines, which for a little while I was not doing. And as a result, this past Sunday, hold on. I had to fill at 50% for some reason. Fix that. There we go. That's what it's supposed to look like. This past Sunday, I completed one of my other deadlines and finished the pencils for the entire book. Now, this is a monumental step. This is huge. It is... You just saw me do pencils, and I got this done pretty quickly. But the drawing style I'm using for CosPain is significantly simpler than what I'm using for letters. And it took me just over an hour. Well, it took me half an hour to do the pencils on this, and that was quick. Often these pencils take a lot longer than that. But that's one strip. We're talking about 238 pages And that was no small feat, especially considering I realized while working on the pencils that I had to stop and go back to writing, which I haven't done very often. It's difficult to backtrack when you've gotten to a certain point in a project. Close. Uh, so I was having a lot of trouble with deadlines on this one. Um, I was missing most of them. That's not an exaggeration. I was having a really hard time keeping up. Need to make a quick alteration that I just noticed. No one who's not looking incredibly closely will notice that I just made this change when the final product's done, because this has been turned down to 50%, which is why everything looks gray. When it's full color, no one will know anything. But yeah, when I was, let's go ahead and do that color. Yeah, I was having a lot of trouble with it, and a big part of that was I was trying to do CosPain and letters at the same time. Um, and at the start of the year, I had a resolution that I wanted to get used to working and doing 2 CosPain strips a week. Not posting them yet, but eventually I would like to. And this was going to be a tall order, but I started doing it. And because I was just keeping them, I started having a backlog. And when I was really getting stuck in doing rewrites for the new letters book, I realized I have a backlog. Why don't I just stop working on CosPain for a week or two and only work on letters? And it was like a switch was flipped. All of a sudden, I was working way better than I had been. And what I realized was the problem was I was getting stressed out and not by having 2 huge projects that I was worrying about at the exact same time. When I'm only worrying about one project at a time, I'm way more efficient because I'm less stressed. And when I get stressed, I tend to shut down. I know that's not a good thing, but that's what happens when I get stressed. Turn off contiguous and sample all layers. Here's a little trick I do to do the stripes on her outfit. But yeah, once I did that, I realized that this was the solution to all the problems I've been having with writing this, doing both these series. I just need to get a backlog of CosPain so I could worry about it more exclusively. And it turns out that worked great. I set up like a 2-month backlog and just stopped worrying about letters and started working on, I'm sorry, stopped working on CosPain and started working on letters. And I was able to start getting deadlines done, which is why I'm setting up a backlog over the next couple of weeks. Should I make like this silhouette of her stripe too? Let me just see what that looks like. Nope, that's stupid. But yeah, it's kind of amazing having my stress level decreased by prioritizing projects like that. Um, I kind of feel like I have my life back in certain ways. I'm having a much better time with comics than I did for a little while. So one of the tough things with being a cartoonist is keeping your morale up, um, which is not easy. Uh, you don't do comics because it is easy to do, because it's not. Comics can be very stressful, very time intensive, very energy intensive. Like I'm going to tell you this: after I finish this strip, I'm going to be wiped. Also because I'm talking the whole time, which is uh, fun but not easy. And it's something that we do say you have to really love if you're going to do it seriously, if you're going to put that kind of energy into it. That doesn't mean, so just because you love something doesn't mean that you're always going to like doing it. It's kind of a weird way of putting it, but there are definitely going to be times where you just have to bite the bullet and plow through it even though you don't feel like doing it, or it feels awful. And there are times when it can lower your quality of life in certain ways. It's an ugly truth, but it's part of the fact of doing what we do. And I'm actually gonna, no one's gonna notice this little bit, but I'm gonna care. um, it's one thing that I think is important to reinforce is just because you love doing something doesn't mean you always love doing it. You sometimes need to take a break. You sometimes need to find various ways to refresh. And you sometimes need to figure out that you are doing too much and need to stop doing too much. And that's basically what happened to me. Um, and thankfully, I became more productive when I did that. There's a book, actually, I have it right here. My mom recently sent this to me by Neil Gaiman called Art Matters. There's an interesting section in there where he talks about how he realized he'd become a machine for answering emails that occasionally wrote on the side. And so he started answering fewer emails and he found he was writing more. And I think it's a very similar principle. What was I? Already got the hair. Let's get that undershirt. I forgot to name this. It's the coloring layer. One of the other things that has reduced my stress dramatically has been I started getting better about getting money for side things. One of the big ones is I recently signed up for a service called Upworks. What Upworks does is it basically is a networker for creators and for freelancers and clients, which is an incredibly useful thing to have. I've had a really hard time finding clients. Like I haven't had much luck with it. So very often I'm stuck doing my own projects, which I'm not getting really paid for much. Um, and that can be a problem when you're trying to survive. And Upwork it's been slow so far, but it's giving me opportunities, and that's been big. The other big thing that's been helping, uh, and honestly has helped more, is I recently became a driver for Lyft. This is the first non-artistic job that I have taken since I started doing all this full time. And it was a hard thing to get my head around because I really wanted to be self-sufficient as an artist without doing anything else. But Lyft was a good compromise, um, because you're still working on your own hours, you're still your own boss, and it's just a good way to get supplemental income. It's not that difficult for me to make a couple $100 just in a week. And having that little bit of income adds so much security. Like if I'm able to make a couple $100 a week consistently, that pays my rent. Um, that is just invaluable. And I can't emphasize enough how useful that is when you're trying to do your own thing. Plus, I kind of like it. Like I enjoy driving. Um, I enjoy meeting new people when that's the opportunity that's presented to me. Quite often, like most people who ride with Lyft don't want to talk. They just kind of sit there quietly in the back seat, and I fully respect that. Like honestly, that makes my life easier. As but I'm also perfectly happy to engage in conversation, and sometimes that leads to uh, some interesting connections. What first got me interested in doing Lyft, and it's funny because a lot of people wouldn't admit to this, but was a Lyft ad. I am a big fan of advertisements. Um, I actually considered going into advertising when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life because I thought I couldn't do comics for a living. And what of course I realized is I might not be able to do comics for a living, but I sure as hell want to try and would rather do that than anything else. So why would I shoot for the halfway measure first? But I've always been interested in how ads manipulate the viewer. And I don't say that in a bad way. A lot of people view ads as somehow underhanded. And some of them you could argue are, but I also feel like it's a bit. So there's a magician who was on Penn and Teller Fool Us, who once said that magicians are the most honest performers in the world because they tell you they're going to lie and then they do it. Everyone knows an ad is an ad. That is, everyone knows its purpose. Everyone knows why it exists. But it's interesting to see how it works. And it's interesting to see when an ad is genuinely effective. And this Lyft ad was. This was, when I originally saw it, I believe a 6-minute ad before a YouTube video. Now I know what you're thinking. Most people skip those ads. They click through them. I don't know why I watched this one. I guess it's just the design really caught my eye, and I was surprised by what I was seeing because it was a full animated short film called June. I will link to it in the YouTube replay of this. You should see it. It'll be in the description, and you should see an annotation appear in the corner of the video. And I would highly recommend you check it out. This is a link to the long version. I want to say it's about 10 minutes. But it's an incredible story. It's a really well done animation. It's kind of obviously an ad, but you don't care because it's so well done. It's such a beautiful story. It's such an interesting setup they've done. And I've watched it multiple times, and I kid you not, I tear up watching this. It's that well done. And I'm not trying to claim to be super manly or any crap like that, but I'm not really the type who gets choked up by stuff. I just don't. It's not my default reaction to just about anything. And I remember the first time I saw that, I'm like, am I getting choked up to an ad? And then I watched it another time, and it happened again. I watched it another time, and it happened again. That is impressive. Like, even when you know what's happening, even when you know you're being manipulated, it's fascinating to me that they were able to keep its effectiveness that long because it's just a well told story. And obviously, this is not what made me drive for Lyft. It's what got Lyft on my radar, though, because up until then, all I'd really heard of was Uber. And I don't know, I had a genuine good feeling about Lyft that didn't go away the more I heard about them because you heard some bad stuff about Uber, and Lyft, by comparison, was coming out way cleaner. So when I was looking for freelance opportunities and side things I could do, and I'm not going to lie, my last tax return had a pretty big effect on that because the numbers were not quite there. I started driving for Lyft, and it was a pretty easy sign up process. Uh, it's been, I will say that I was hoping that I'd be doing better with it. Um, I am currently making somewhere between, on most trips I go out, I'm making about $10 to $15 an hour, which is not great. But as supplemental income, it's not bad. Um, and it also gives me an opportunity to get out of the house, to be interacting with other people, to be getting to know the city a little better. Like, one of the things I've been learning so much about the city, just I've been driving for a month, and there's parts of the city I've discovered that I didn't know about. And it's been it's been good. I'm working on figuring out how to make better money with it. One of the big things I might have to do is start doing both Uber and Lyft. It's what a lot of people who do rideshare driving do. I've been holding off because, uh, just honestly, the two main factors are, as I mentioned, I've heard questionable things about Uber, and I'd rather help, work with Lyft if I can. And the other one is I'm a little bit. I honestly am not sure my phone can handle having both those apps running at the same time. My phone is not in great shape right now, so it might just not have the stamina for something like that. Uh, but long run, that's probably going to happen. For something like this, there's a fair argument for not really being. It's not exactly beggars can't be choosers, but I can't afford to be ignoring one of the biggest rideshare programs out there if that's what I'm doing. You know what I mean? Uh, and we'll see what ends up happening with it. If I end up doing both, that'd be great. One of the things that's been really weird driving for Lyft, I still can't figure out how airport rides are supposed to work. Like, uh, leave going from the airport to other places. The reason I can't figure it out is that I've had two different experiences with it, two different types of experiences. One is what you're supposed to do, which is there's a lot that they've set aside that it's one of the long-term lots, so customers are using it, but so is Lyft, and I believe Uber might be using the same lot. So drivers will uh, pull into the lot, and that puts them in a queue. And when their number comes up, they get the next ride from the airport. And you're like, okay, great. Um, I've sat in that queue twice. The first time, I was there for a little over an hour. And the second time, I was there for an hour and a half. My car battery died while I was waiting, so I missed my spot in the queue and got put at the end. So I just left. Um, it was it was not good. Now, the alternative, and this is something that I'm genuinely wondering whether. So this is I've looked it up online. Lyft has very specific rules about picking up at the airport, and that was one of them. That you had to go into this queue. This is how you were supposed to do it. Except when I've dropped people off at the airport, I'll sometimes get a ding saying there's someone else who needs to be picked up at the airport. And I haven't entered the queue. I just arrived. So I have no idea why it's letting that happen. And I don't want to be gaming that system. Once I get a ride, like it's actually bad if I turn down a ride. It reflects negatively on my numbers. So whenever this happens, I'm accepting it. In fact, in a couple cases, the person's just been automatically put in my queue. I haven't had a choice in the matter. Okay, this is just one thing I need to decide. Does that look better? You know what? I think it will. We'll have a better idea when the colors are. You know what? I have an idea of how to do this. Oh, I didn't have myself. Create second coloring layer. Ooh. There we go. I can swap that out should the need arise. You can just turn that off. I'm going to lock this layer so I'm not worrying about accidentally doing anything. Where was I? Oh yeah, the airport for Lyft. I really don't have any idea why it's doing it that way. There's one other very weird thing about this airport. So the way they have it laid out, there's this really weird loop you have to drive if you need to go back around. That's really, really inconvenient. Like it takes 5 minutes if you go through one of the terminals to get back out and get back to the terminal, or to get from departure to arrivals. You shouldn't have. It shouldn't take this long, or be this roundabout. But it is how it's set up. The problem is, I forgot to do this here too. Let me make it a little fatter. There we go. Right. Letting myself get distracted by talking about this. Oh, I forgot to create a save file for this. Let me do that. So I mentioned saving it before as a tip. I change it to a Photoshop file when I'm working on it, which I know you don't technically need to do. Like there are some art tech heads who'll be looking at that and like, why are you switching the file types? And it's like, because I'd rather be working with PSDs. Sue me. And let's see. I'm going to start working on Mike's colors. But yeah, for some reason, when customers sign up to or use Lyft to try and get to the airport, if they don't pick correctly, like, and this is on the customer technically, but if you don't know the area, which is common if you're going to an airport, you don't know that this is a problem. If you click the wrong thing, it'll take you to the back part of the airport, which is not near the terminal. And I'm starting to catch it when that happens. It's not always obvious, and it adds about 5 minutes of transit. It's not crazy, but it's inconvenient. And it can be a real problem if someone's in a hurry. I always check if they're in a hurry to get to the airport, um, especially since this particular airport can be confusing. What else? I had a fun one the other day where the location we were going to, which is sort of the trendy arts district of Columbus, called Short North, was entirely flooded. So getting the customer as close as I could was a treat. But she tipped well, so that's good. By the way, something I need to throw out there. I did not realize this, but most people who use Lyft don't tip. The majority, at least in my area. Um, and on some level, I get that. Uh, Particularly with um, Uber. Uber, for a long time, specified that not only do you not need to tip, but you're not supposed to tip. Uh, Drivers were supposed to refuse any tips offered. And to that, I say, Uber, you suck. Because that messed things up for everybody. Um, it's weird because everyone I've ever talked to, I haven't given these people rides. I'm talking about friends and things like that. Always are confused when I say this because they're like, I always tip my driver. Why wouldn't I tip the driver? Like to them, it's obvious, but that is not the case for everybody apparently. And if it's one of the cheap rides, which I think is $5 to a customer, um, to us it's $3. If you're just going back and forth and you're using Lyft constantly, uh, I get it. I get that, and we do get paid decent. Um, but I'll tell you right now, we have the ability to rate customers, and I have given good ratings to every customer that's tipped me. I've been charitable and not put down anything if you didn't tip me. I'm not giving you bad ratings because you don't tip. But you want a good rating, tip me. It could be $1. It could be just anything. Because that dollar means a lot to one of these drivers. We make, I'd say, 60% of the money, but we also had to drive to get to you. We're going to have to drive around for a while waiting for another client. Uh, Although, one of the other tricks that I have realized and uh, has been great for me since I work from home is I'll be in my office, and when I've not necessarily finished for the day, but I've gotten to a stage where I don't have to stress about uh, what I'm where I've done at least the minimum of what I was supposed to take care of that day. Then at that point, I'll keep working, but I'll turn on my Lyft app and wait to get a client. And sometimes it takes a while. I'm out in a part of Columbus called New Albany, which is fairly suburban and doesn't have, like, I'll sometimes go a couple hours and not get anything. But I'm not wasting gas. I'm not just driving around. I'm doing stuff at home. I'm working on my computer on the stuff that really matters to me. And it, and then when a ding comes up, all I have to do is save what I'm doing and go out the front door. And it's pretty efficient that way. Um, if you are a freelancer and you are comfortable with the idea of driving people, you could do worse. This is a pretty solid way to make money. I also think that in other towns, it's probably a lot more profitable. Columbus, it's tough because most people here drive. Uh, it's not a town where you can get around easily if you don't. And using like using ride shares and things like that can get pricey. What I'd be really interested in seeing, a lot of cities have uh, group rates, or what's the term? I can't think of what it's called, but you can basically pay a little bit less money, but it means that you're sharing the ride with other people. And I would absolutely 100% do that because you get paid better. It's pretty straightforward math that if you have more people, even if they're paying less, you're getting a cut of every single person. And if multiple, and it increases the odds that someone's going to tip you. Ugh, getting close to end of the basic coloring. Yeah. So one of the things that was kind of funny, I gave a Lyft ride to a guy who runs his own small business, and he was talkative. He was a fun guy to chat with. I want to say his name was Jack. I need to check. I gave him a very good rating, but he was. I'll also give you a good rating if you're a good conversationalist. And one of the things that was interesting was he got to talking about what I did because in many ways it's similar because I'm a freelancer and he's a small business owner and we deal with some of the similar stuff. And he was being very positive about what I'm doing. Is like, you're having a rough go of it, but you're finding ways to support yourself. You're finding ways to make all this happen. You are on the right track, and you just need to keep doing what you're doing. And I was like, "Can you call my mom? Do you mind telling her what you just said to me?" Uh, so yeah, it's been very good. The other benefit is when I'm not driving a client, when I'm driving around looking for a client or I'm headed back home. That's one of my other tricks. I you kind of use my place as home base. So whenever I don't have a client, I'm headed back home, and very often I'll get another client on my way. So it's it's a decent. It's better than just randomly driving around because worst case scenario, I'm where I needed to get anyway. But I forgot the point I was going to make. Okay, it'll come back to me in a second while I'm working on this. But yeah. Oh, I know what it was. So I'm driving around a lot either when I'm headed home or when I'm waiting for another client to pop up. I've been listening to audiobooks, and I am cranking through these audiobooks. Uh, I do audiobooks a lot anyway, but it'll usually take me a couple weeks to get through a book and things like that. And now I'm getting through like about 3 books every 2 weeks. I'm really pounding through them because I'm in the car all the time, and it's giving me an opportunity to do that. And it's great because I really love audiobooks. Um, it's funny because I never really listened to them much growing up. They were a lot less practical, even a decade or two ago. When they were first starting out and they were on tapes and you have to have all these tapes or you have CDs and you have to have a bunch of CDs and those CDs could cost 50, $60 as they were huge. But I use Audible, and Audible is an absolutely fantastic uh, app and works perfectly for exactly what I'm trying to do. It's going to make my life easy. So we go. We're getting close. What color should I make his shirt? I thought about going with my brand color, but that's the color I use for the table here. I'll use yellow. That'll work. Oop, I had that turned off. I just finished an audiobook called We Are Legion, We Are Bob, which is a kind of tongue-in-cheek sci-fi story. Not bad. Could have used, I think, a little bit more editing, but good, fun concept. And it's supposed to be, I think, I need to check to see if he's got any more books out in the series. But I imagine they get better. Like, I kind of had that sounds snooty, but it kind of feels like I had to get the idea out, and future ones will be better. All right. Yeah, I'll use the same colors. A little throwback. Why not? Use that. But yeah, I've been getting more and more into sci-fi and fantasy novels, which is funny because those both sound like things that you'd think I was already really into. Uh, and honestly, I haven't been in a long time. It does feel good to be getting back into them. Let me make you larger and eraser. But yeah, here we go. It's always hard to keep talking through the whole thing, but I am going to try to get back into it. So the how about then Yankees? I don't know. What else do I have to talk about? I actually made a cheat sheet so I have subjects just in case I went blank like this. Oh, something I forgot to mention regarding letters. So I mentioned that I'm planning a backlog for the next couple of months. The reason is my next big scheduling thing is I need to finish the inks by the beginning of August. Now this is a tall order, 238 pages worth of inks. Inking is much faster than doing the pencils, especially in letters, which this particular series, it's the way I designed it. It is the inking is actually pretty light, so I'm not too. I should be able to do it, and that's why I'm creating that backlog. My overall goal is to be done with the book by the beginning of December. So I really am trying to have this done this year. And when it's getting at least close to there, it might happen a little before, it might happen shortly after I finish it. But I plan to do a Kickstarter. And that's going to be, I really want to get it done this year because it's going to be a big part of my income for the year. Like, that's going to be huge and just very important money. So, and I'm also going to be asking, like, the current plan is that my first Kickstarter, which I did for the first letters book, I asked for $1,000 and I got about 1,500. Like, you guys were great and you helped me make this amount of money pretty quickly. I made the goal in about 7 days, and it was a 30-day Kickstarter. Um, but what I need to do for this one, because this book's going to be longer, and my hope is I'm selling more copies. Uh, and that is going to be the goal for that is 2,000, which is going to be tougher to hit, and I need to hit that. Like I really, really want to. So we will see how all that goes. If you are interested in keeping track of my progress on that, the best way to keep up, well, there are two ways. One, you can become a patron. Like it's been on the screen the whole time. Patreon.com/BWHcomics. Even if you're just following me, like even if you're not paying money, although, please pay money. But even if you just go there and follow me, you will get my regular updates, which include updates on how Letters is going, like what the progress is on this whole crazy thing. And the advantages, and so you get to, get an inside peek, check in on the progress, and, all kinds of other goodies. It'll tell you when this is happening. The other way you can get those newsletters, by the way, if you don't want to follow me on Patreon for whatever reason, maybe you don't use the site, I get it. But the other way is send me an email. It's also bwhcomics@gmail.com, or you can go to bwhcomics.com and click on the link for this and sign up for my newsletter. I try not to spam people. I generally am sending out something once a week, roughly. And I am, let's go with that color. It's just a good way to keep track of what's going on with my comics, what cons I'm going to be showing up at, let's go with that. It's just a good way in general to keep up with what's going on with all these projects. And presumably, if you're watching this, you have some interest at least in what I'm doing. And let's go with soft purple. I'm going to be turning down these back colors a little bit more. Let's find a good pink. Pinks are tricky. Let me see if I can steal one. Very good pink in here. That's a pretty good pink. Oh, that's a better pink. I'm going to cut this to 40. How about 30? No. Let me see if I can just change that top color. Let's make it green. Let's make you multiply. No. That's pretty good. Okay. Lock you. Right now, get to fill in the white. Oh, shoot. Fix that. So, yeah. What else we got? Now that my little shilling is over. I hate shilling, but it's part of what I got to do. And again, presumably, if you're here, you have some interest in what I'm doing. Or you just randomly happen to come across this, in which case, welcome. Yeah, I'm very excited for getting to make some progress in Letters. Although, I will admit, I've spent the last week doing next to nothing. And the reason for that is because I've been working, really burning the candle at both ends, trying to get those pencils done. And as a result, it's been a very tiring process, and I just needed a break from it. I needed a little bit of time where I was not worrying about making comics. And I'd say it paid off. What I ended up doing is playing a video game for several days and just doing nothing else. It felt fantastic. It was Batman Arkham Knight. I like the Arkham games and hadn't gotten a chance to play that one yet, and it was much needed. I felt amazing after just after one day of doing that, because sometimes you need a break. Sometimes you need to not be doing comics just for a little while. I know one of my instructors, Alec Longstreth, would probably be mortified to hear me say that. He was fond of telling us that he had inscribed on the inside of his wedding ring GCED. Also his wife's initials, I think, but he threw in there GCED, which stands for Draw Comics Every Day. So he takes that kind of thing very seriously. I also take comics seriously, but I also recognize that sometimes you can burn out, and that's not good for anybody. What is happening? My Photoshop may have blocked up. Escape. Save.